All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Pratt, and I appreciate you joining me today. I had an assignment for school where they wanted us to give basically a professional presentation on something, and we had the opportunity to think about things that are important to us or um, things that we think that a talk would help others if we gave. So I decided to give one on my experience with auditory processing disorder. I don't personally have it. My son does. He's 11 years old, and his name is Caius. And, I really wanted to take the time to present this to the different APD groups that I'm a part of because I think if you are part of those groups, you constantly see new people coming into the groups who are looking for answers. And this is a good opportunity for me to kind of give the basics of APD as well as kind of give my own personal opinion and experience with it. Um, Today, I'll be kind of talking about what worked for us. I don't want anyone to feel like anything they do to try and help their child is a bad thing. So, in me expressing what I think works or maybe doesn't work, it's not to put shade on what you're doing for your child because I understand more than anyone that you'll do anything for your children. All right, so let's talk a little bit. So I really wasn't raised around little kids, and my son was my first child. So the first experience I had knowing something was off was when I took him in for his second year checkup. He hit the mark on everything except when the doctor asked how many words he had, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, maybe like 5." And at the time, I thought that was great. And he looked at me, he looked concerned, and he said, "You should have about 50 to 75 words by now." I mean, it sideswiped me. It seemed crazy. I mean, he was a perfectly normal little kid. Like, why should he have 50 to 75 words? He was doing fine. But at that point, everything changed. At that point, it became I have to figure out what's going on with him. Why isn't he hitting these marks? What does that mean for his future? How do I help him? I mean, all those same things that crossed really all of your minds when you realized your child wasn't hitting those milestones. In the end, it took about 4 years till my son was about 4 years old before he could really even form a slightly coherent sentence. And of course, it took till he was 7 to get an appropriate diagnosis, which I know all of you know is a torturous waiting period to wait to get like a solid answer. Okay, so today I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about APD. A lot of you are already very aware of all this information, but I thought in doing just a general overview was a good idea. I know every year I have to explain to my son's teachers, I have to explain to family members, friends, what is wrong with him isn't super apparent, but it comes out and it challenges him in a lot of ways. And if people aren't aware of why these challenges are happening, they think he's not listening or he's not paying attention or he doesn't care. And it's all the opposites. He's doing he's working harder, he's concentrating harder, and he cares more than just about any kid. So it's important that we as parents, because we're their advocates for quite a while, understand how to maybe get across what this is to people and in a pretty simple way. And it's also important that our children at a certain point step up, become their own advocates, and they're able to express what this is. Okay, so let's see. This is sort of the technical description of APD. APD is the main underlying cognitive cause of developmental dyslexia, the problems of not being able to process the gaps between the sounds that letters represent in a word, not being able to use phonics, nor being able to phonetically sound out new words. When asked to explain APD, I often use dyslexia as sort of a jumping off point for reference. It's one of those learning disabilities that just about everybody has heard of and has an idea of what it is. So I always say, just like a person who has dyslexia can't process words on a paper, and when they look at it, it looks scrambled. It's the same for a person with APD. They interpret sounds and information differently. They perceive it as an unmanageable jumble when it comes into their ears. So here are some of the symptoms of a person struggling with APD, difficulty listening with background noise, speech therapy or language delays when young, poor auditory attention, drifts off in class, difficulty with phonics and speech sound discrimination, poor auditory memory, often misunderstands what is said, needs information to be repeated, poor expressive language skills, slow or delayed response to verbal requests and instruction. My son basically displayed all of these symptoms, and he's gotten better at hiding some of them. I think the most important part of APD for a parent to understand is that this is them. This is a part of them. This is not a mistake that needs to be cured. This is just who they are. This is a lifetime issue. And rather than, this is my own personal opinion, once again, rather than chasing a cure that doesn't really exist or that there's no funding for finding, my time is better spent preparing my son for the realities of his life, which are be your own advocate. He's already learned a million different coping skills. So helping him with those, helping him maintain those, helping him with the small things you're going to have to do at school to like having him sit in the front of the class, those sorts of things to help him. And the biggest thing is self-esteem. This is what I realized. How do I keep him feeling good about himself? Because I don't want him to look at this like a negative in his life. He has to look at it like it's a challenge and one he can conquer and one he can be proud of proud of managing. He has to speak out about it. It's the shame, it's the embarrassment, it's, he's gonna get teased. All kids do, and it's extra hard for him because to have a quick comeback is not really something he does that well. It's a struggle. But so for me, those are, as a parent at this point, those are the things I'm focusing on for him. I want him to feel good about himself, the grades, everything else, that'll fall into place. I promise it does, Okay, so that's sort of describing what's going on. This is another little thing I like to say. If you can imagine what it's like for a child with APD, I use this often with teachers because, as you know, we have to educate the teachers a lot of times. So I try to explain to them, okay, so for him, when you're sitting in a class, you hear the teacher talking, the heater running, the people behind you talking, a pencil tapping on the desk. And for us, your brain does the hard work. It prioritizes the sound. It makes the teacher the main focus for your brain to evaluate. It's an absolutely effortless process that just sort of happens. For a child with APD, now I'm talking from what I think is happening because, of course, I can't hear what he's hearing, but it seems to me it's like all the sounds have equal value. And one over another doesn't get prioritized. So it's this one large amount of commotion that he has to himself sort through and prioritize and figure out what he needs to work the hardest at trying to hear. And he's done that. He's learned through practice how to do that. Now, is it easy? No. You wonder why your kid comes home exhausted from school because they have actively listened all day long. All day long. We go through life and it's just sort of happening. We're hearing things where our brain is just kind of doing what it needs to do. With them, it's not happening. With them, it's like every conversation requires effort. Every time a teacher talks, every bit of instructions, I would be exhausted. And they are too. Okay, so let's see. So what are some of the things that you can do in a classroom? Well, preferential seating, I think that's really important. If nothing else, it just forces them to be engaged. Visual aids are always great. You're going to have teachers some years who are really, really built for teaching your child, and sometimes you're not. And that just, is life, right? So they have to learn to gather up accommodations for themselves in a lot of ways, and work through it. My son used an FM system for a while. I know a lot of your children do. The FM system, for him, it was all right. Now, he had one that just had a speaker. The teacher talked into a mic, and there was a speaker that came at him. So he didn't seem blown away by it. He used it for a year. Maybe if he'd had one that went directly into his ear, it would have worked better. Every child is different. That's the thing, right? So maybe what didn't work for Caius would work for a bunch of other kids, But for me, it seemed like in the end, okay, dragging this FM system with him when he's not even really thinking it's working great is not worth it. Like he is always going to be the key component, going forward in the future. So he needs to learn to adapt because unfortunately, as we know in society, they're not going to adapt for him. He may get small accommodations, but overall, he's going to have to learn techniques that help him, organizing techniques, speech techniques, in a workplace, how to navigate what the boss wants from him, what's his best way of going about that, and of course, in the future, social stuff, which is really coming up now that he's going into middle school. All right, so this is the FM system. Yeah, not a bad thing. I'll tell you what worked best for my son. And a lot of you, like I said, I think it's gonna be a little different, but he really struggled with reading. I didn't take him to preschool. I was like, he needs a little more time. I need to, just give him a little more time to develop. And I put him in kindergarten. And he had been so busy trying to figure out how to talk that really we didn't have the space to do things like learn ABCs. We did a little of it, but he couldn't retain it. His short-term memory was so bad. I know a lot of you talk about that, the short-term memory issues that come along with it. It will get better. I've seen it get better with him, but I will say it was scary when he was little because like I said, I couldn't even manage to get him to memorize the ABCs or say them all correctly or anything like that. And from what I've read, it seems like that happens because that part of their brain is being utilized for speech. It typically wouldn't be, but it is in their case. So their brain's sort of rerouting things and doing the best it can. And so they don't have time to be fooling around with memorizing those ABCs at that moment. It's being used for other stuff. So once I realized that, I backed off. Okay, we're not going to memorize the ABCs. We're just going to get our sentences straight. We're just going to do what we can with that. So he was behind. Of course, they're all behind because, look, he wasn't even really picking up words till he was about 4. So that put him at 2 years behind every other kid, speech-wise, reading-wise, every way-wise, So once he got in there and he started getting extra help, he was behind for several years. I'd say up until about to the end of 3rd grade, he was behind. I didn't let it bother me. To me, for him, the important part is I want you to try. As long as you're trying, I don't care what your grades say about what you're doing. Like, I'm not interested in how far along they think you are. If you're not hitting marks, whatever. I'm interested in seeing you put effort always towards everything you're doing in school. And he did, and I was fine with that. He got a lot of extra help. He got speech, he got extra reading, he got some math help. And, to this day, I'm indebted to all those teachers. I mean, really, they made the difference. But long story short, in 1st grade, one of the reading teachers at the school, we approached and asked if she would do tutoring for him outside of school. And she agreed to it. And for 3 years, after school, twice a week, and even in the summers, she tutored him for 45 minutes. Direct, this is what we need to work on. It was always quiet because it was after school. And it was just him and her, And I'm telling you, that made a huge, huge difference. If you can provide your child with one-on-one, very quiet instruction to reinforce what they're learning during the day, it'll help. It really did. He is an ace reader now. I mean, he's awesome at it. And I know that's why. Because in a traditional learning environment, there's just too much going on. And even with the extra help at school, usually it's a group environment. So he was only garnering so much from that. So yeah, for him at this point, it's preferential seating. Like next year, we're probably going to get a math tutoring. It's not that he's not good at math, because he is good at math, but it's going to get more complex, and having a tutor to kind of quietly reinforce the stuff he's learning in the classroom, I think is going to be really beneficial to him. Okay, so that's the the basics of APD, and you know, so some of my personal thoughts and feelings. I don't know. I guess I could share a story about kind of when I had my turning point with it. At 2, when I found out he was coming along differently than other kids, I kind of went into super hyper mode. Like, let's read everything we can, let's find everything we can, let's do everything we can. And around 3, his pediatrician suggested he go to a speech therapist at the center. At the time, I had no idea like what. I just thought, okay, speech therapist, right? So we went, and they did like a 30-minute assessment. And at this point, he cried a lot. He was always freaking out everywhere we went. And now that I look back, I get it. He couldn't ask me questions about what was going on. He couldn't tell me how he was feeling, if he was tired, if he didn't want to be there. His only go-to was crying. So there was a lot of that going on when he was little. So that didn't help the way he came across, let's just say that. But anyway, we went to this speech therapist. She did her little assessment, this quick little assessment, do this, stack these blocks, do that. That's great if you're talking to a kid who understands what you're asking of him, but he didn't, and I didn't know what was going on enough to explain that to her. And she, in her mind, had already decided, oh, this kid's that or this kid's that. And, I'm telling this story not because I want people who have kids who have APD to think, oh, there could be nothing else wrong with my kid, because that's not always the case. But she came back with, well, I think he could be on the autism spectrum. And I'll tell you, just in my gut, I just thought, that doesn't sound right. It just doesn't seem right. He's so engaged. He wants to connect with people. He's running up to little kids he doesn't know and trying to play. Is it awkward? Yeah, it's awkward. But it's always awkward if you can't communicate with someone. It'd be awkward if you went to China and tried to just walk up to somebody out of nowhere and talk to them and you two didn't speak the same language. Yeah, it'd be awkward. So I told her, I said, I don't want you putting that down in his paperwork, because I feel like if you do that, you're going to stop looking for other things that could be going on with him. Because I knew once that diagnosis was laid on him, that's where we would be. That's where people would be trying to help him with something. And I was like, we're wasting time. I feel like we're wasting time on something that wasn't wrong with him. Like, let's get to what is wrong with him. Help me here. And of course, the general feeling with that is, oh, this parent's in denial. This parent just doesn't want to admit this is what's wrong with their child. And that is not what was happening. I would have, if I thought that was what was wrong, I would have run with it. Once again, I want to get help. I want to do what's best for him. That is it. But I'm the only thing between him and some nonsense. And I had to say, we need to figure out what is wrong. So I had her not write it down, but I said, sure, we can still do the speech therapy. I'm okay with that. Let's do it. Because I wanted him to get some sort of help. I wanted to feel like we were doing something for him, So I brought him back, and the first time we went was the last time we went. They put him in front of this, he left cars at the time, and they put him in front of this toy that had, that you drop the car down and it went down into the garage, and he just loved it. He did it over and over, and he was playing with it. And at one point, she takes the car from him. And of course, he reaches for it and he wants it back. And, he doesn't have the words to say, give it back. So there's just a bit of a shriek and give me the thing back is what he's trying to say. And she said, no, it's the car. And he just got more and more and more upset. This went on. Let me just say, this went on. It could have been a half a minute. It felt like an hour. And he just freaks out, as any 3-year-old would freak out if you took a toy from him. You mean you're telling me that's not normal? That's normal. He's going to lose his mind. So he did, to the point where she said, well, let's just stop this for today. Okay, so as we're walking out, I'm just thinking to myself, what has just happened? This felt so wrong. The whole thing felt wrong. And I knew at that moment, what is going on with him is not what they think it is. And I have to kind of protect him from people who think they know, but don't. Because I didn't know exactly what was happening with him at the time, but I knew he couldn't say what he wanted to say. I knew he couldn't communicate with her and say the word car. So what might work for an autistic child and withholding something and forcing them outside of themselves to engage, to make them engage, to take that, to get that toy back, is not going to work with a child with APD because they can't say it. And they may not even understand what you're saying. So at that moment, things really changed for me. I said, nah, I'm not doing this. I'm not taking him to anybody else. I'm giving him time. I'm going to protect him. I'm going to hold him close to me. And I did. We didn't do preschool. There were certain social situations I just didn't put him in. I'll tell you what, and this is one of the worst things was going to the grocery store because he was the cutest little boy with these big old cheeks and dimples. And every old person in the world wanted to come up and say, hi, what's your name? And how old are you? And he never knew what was going on. And it always felt so awkward and uncomfortable, and I had to speak for him. Oh, his name's Caius and he's 3 years old. And, it's like, I just wanted people to stay away from him because I didn't want people judging him until he was ready, till his potential had sort of been realized, if that makes sense. I think I knew I needed to protect his psyche above all. Like he was developing slower. He was developing in a non-typical manner, but he was developing. He was always picking up new stuff from the age 4 on. It was different than everybody else, but it was happening. And as long as he was continuing to progress, I felt like things are going to be okay, or things are going to be what they're going to be. But I'm not in the meantime going to put him in psychologically damaging positions, or I'm not going to put him around people who are judging him or judging me because they don't understand him, and that's what I did. I mean, for good or for bad, that's what I did. And then I had to, of course, let go once he went to kindergarten, which was really tough. But he's done great. That's the thing I want to tell all of you is it's terrifying. It's scary. You don't feel in control of any of it. It's not a really well-known issue. So, people aren't as empathetic. They don't get it. But as long as you build in your child a sense of self, they should be, proud of who they are and their differences. Like I keep telling Caius, it's like, this is you, this is who you are, and this is going to make you stronger. This is going to make you the kind of person that understands, that's empathetic in this world and is a better person and is able to like help others. Like you're going to get it. And that's a beautiful thing to have, and to be able to offer to this world. And I say that, like if I could take it away, if I could make it easier for him, would I? Sure. But I also wonder like how much of what he's had to go through has made him who he is. And he's such an awesome kid. Like he was terrifying when he was little. His tantrums were horrible because I think he felt so out of control. He felt so out of control and he couldn't express any of his needs properly. He couldn't, or his discomfort or anything else. And I thought, oh my God, this kid, maybe he's crazy. Like what is happening here? And honest to God, he's the most like calm, sweet, caring child, I mean, really, he turned out beautifully and he works so hard. And wherever he gets to in life, I know part of that is because of what he's gone through, and the lessons he's learned. So, on the other hand, would I take it away? No. I mean, I feel like it's as much part of him as his eye color. I really do. I know it's hard for a lot of people because we want to know why. I want to know why our child has this. Why are they different? What did I do? Was this something to do with my labor? Was it something I ate? Was it, did I not talk to them enough? Like, what did I do? But if we put that sort of pressure on ourselves or shame on ourselves, what is that saying to them? It makes them feel like, badly, So we embrace it as just who they are, that it makes them special and unique. It gives them a leg up in life in a lot of ways. They're going to be harder workers. They're going to be more empathetic. And we help them learn to advocate for themselves. Because, look, I got into 5th grade. He's done fantastic. He got a honor roll. He basically killed it in school last year. He finally kind of got all the coping mechanisms together. And it is working for him. And now we get to go to middle school where I live. He'll be going into 6th grade, and I feel like all bets are off. Who knows? The next phase for him is social stuff. We've dealt a little bit with it. There's so many misunderstandings that happen for a child with APD. It's kind of crazy. He's learned to ask himself, did I mishear that? Or am I taking that the wrong way? Because we had a lot of talks about that. He had a lot of issues with friends this year. And I think it's only going to get worse with hormones and girls and all that stuff. He's always been the type to kind of give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think he tends to hang out with people sometimes that other kids won't, because they're not the nicest kids sometimes, and he just doesn't get it. Like he wants to think the best of them. So anyway, not looking forward to 6th grade personally. He is, and I know sometimes in our feed there's people adults with APD who feel like, well, listening to these parents talk and they want their own group, and I get that, but I can't express to you how much it helps to hear from people with APD who are grown-ups, because my son stinks at communicating at this point, like what he's really, really feeling. He stumbles over it. It's hard for him. So it's nice for me to kind of be able to see what someone who's lived with it, what their successes, the things they struggle with, like all that is great information for us parents. So we know how to help them going forward. Thinking about careers and thinking about spouses and places where they're going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to adjust in their adult life, because things aren't going to be quite typical for them, it's given me a lot of food for thought. So I just want any of you out there who currently share in our feed to know we appreciate it. The good and the bad. It's all good information. It's real deal stuff, because unfortunately with APD there's not that much out there. I mean, there's some books and they're great. When the Brain Can't Hear is a great one. Like Sound Through Water, that's another really good one. All those books were super duper helpful. But actually hearing it from people is also extraordinarily helpful. Any pointers you give on, adjustments you've made or things you've asked for that were helpful, please share, because I know this year we're going to have a whole new list of things that he could potentially need help for. I mean, really, he's done with his 504. All he has is an IEP now. The only additional help he gets is preferential seating, and he gets some longer test time for the end of year tests. And honestly, they wanted to take his 504 away when they dropped his speech last year, and I had to fight for them to keep it, because the thing with something like APD is like you don't know how the next phase in his life is going to affect him. Switching classrooms, having a locker, all these things are like a new dynamic that are going to be a challenge. I think all of us know that with my son, a lot of his biggest struggles now is organization. So that's going to be interesting to see how he handles his locker, how he handles the pressure of that short amount of time to get to his locker, get the lock open, pick the right books, how he's going to handle picking the right books for his homework at the end of the night. Elementary school, it's all very laid out for him. So that's going to be interesting. But you know what? I think he has a better perspective than me in a lot of ways. Like he's just rolling with it. I'm the one who's already prepared myself for all these potential situations. And I guess that's kind of my job. But, my husband and I go back and forth, because at times he says, why do you make such a big deal about the APD? Like I almost feel like you're going to stigmatize him with this, you don't have to bring it up, but I do. I said I had to sort of educate him on the fact that he may look better, he may sound better, but he is constantly doing work in his head that we have no idea about. And there are going to be things in his life and people in his life that he has to to explain this situation to and let them understand, help them understand him better. And if I pretend like it's not happening or it's not a part of who he is, then he doesn't have the skills to navigate that. I want him to be comfortable and proud with it. He's got to be, because this is him, you know. And I hope with this little talk I've given, I hope that's the one thing you all take home with you is it's very scary at first. It really is. I get that. But it's who they are, and they will progress, and they will cope, and they will find a way, and they will move out of your house someday. They will get a job. They will do all that stuff. You know, this is not a horrible life scenario, but it is a real key component to who they are, and it's okay to be different, and that's what we have to pass on to them. Embrace it, love it, like talk about it, you know. And yeah, everybody has something. That's what I always say to him. Everybody has something. Nobody is free and clear in this life. Everybody's got something they're carrying and they're struggling with, and they're, that is a challenge in their life. Yours is just more apparent to you, and it's your challenge, but it's yours to be successful with. Okay. So anyway, thank you all for listening. I hope this helped a little bit. Yeah, and feel free to shoot me questions if you have any. And